This kind of message is built like a lantern in fog. It tries to make uncertainty feel like destiny. It starts with a strong claim that someone is completely consumed by thoughts of you. That instantly heightens emotional intensity and pulls you into a shared, invisible space between two minds. Then it introduces limitation. Yet this connection isn't something either of you can freely act on. That tension is the hook, desire on one side, restriction on the other. Together, they create a feeling of fate paused mid-breath. The two important truths it promises usually point in two directions. First, it often frames emotional intensity as proof of significance, suggesting that strong feelings automatically equal a special or meaningful bond. Second, it reframes distance or inaction not as absence of commitment, but as timing, blockage, or external circumstance beyond control. In other words, it turns ambiguity into a narrative of hidden meaning rather than simple uncertainty. Then comes the psychological pivot. Take a moment. Nothing landed in front of you by chance. This is where the message deepens its grip. It shifts you from thinking critically to feeling guided. Randomness gets replaced with intention. Coincidence becomes sign. Your attention itself is rebranded as evidence that something real must be happening behind the scenes. What's subtle here is the emotional trade it offers. In exchange for uncertainty, it gives meaning. In exchange for waiting, it gives significance. It turns silence into communication and distance into proof of connection. But underneath the poetic framing, the core idea is simple. It's interpreting inner longing as external reality. That doesn't make your feelings fake. It just means the message is assigning them a story, not necessarily revealing an objective truth. If you want, I can break down how these types of fated connection narratives are structured step by step so you can recognize the pattern instantly next time. You didn't stumble onto this by accident. Whoever just crossed your mind as you started reading this is there for a reason. There's someone in your world, maybe someone who keeps popping into your thoughts at the strangest, most unexpected moments, who carries an intense connection to you. This isn't some minor, fleeting feeling. It's not light, and it's definitely not something that's simply passing through. It runs deep, it's constant, and it lives quietly beneath the surface. They are wildly drawn to you, but not in some loud, chaotic, obvious way. It's a contained, almost disciplined kind of intensity, a feeling they've likely never allowed themselves to experience so fully before. And yet, despite how strong it is, this bond feels like something that's off the table entirely. Not because love isn't genuinely there, but because something else stands in the way, blocking the path forward. That forbidden quality is exactly what explains two critical things: why this connection feels so powerful, why there's this strange, persistent distance between the two of you, and why neither one of you seems able to fully move past it. Let's dig into this properly. Before anything else, there's a foundational truth you need to understand. Just because a connection is restricted or off-limits doesn't mean it's weak or insignificant. Actually, it's almost always the opposite. Forbidden bonds are rarely shallow. They don't form out of convenience, boredom, loneliness, or some passing infatuation. They come from something much deeper, a genuine recognition between two people. This person didn't consciously decide to feel this way about you. It crept up slowly, and then, all at once, it became undeniable. At first, you were simply someone they noticed, then someone they respected, then someone they trusted. And somewhere along the way, without either of you quite pinpointing the moment, you became the person they couldn't stop thinking about. What makes this forbidden isn't an absence of love. It's everything surrounding that love: timing, circumstances, obligations, fear, or deeply held moral convictions. This is where the first layer of meaning starts to reveal itself. This person is waging an internal war against their own mind every single day because of you. They're not fighting you. They're fighting their own feelings. They wake up already thinking of you, and almost immediately they start reminding themselves of all the reasons they shouldn't be. They replay your conversations in their head, and then get frustrated with themselves for smiling at the memory. They imagine what it might feel like to actually be near you, and then quickly push that thought aside, because wanting you doesn't scare their heart. It scares the life they've carefully constructed around themselves. For some, this means they're already committed to someone else. For others, it's family expectations, cultural norms, social pressure, or moral boundaries they were raised never to cross. Sometimes one of you simply isn't available in a way that makes things incredibly complicated. Sometimes this connection threatens to unravel everything they thought they wanted out of life. So instead of acting on it, they hold back. Instead of telling you the truth, they create distance. Instead of reaching toward you, they watch quietly from far away. And here's something most people completely misunderstand. Silence doesn't mean the feelings aren't there. More often than not, silence means the feelings are simply too overwhelming to handle openly. This person isn't calm when it comes to you. They're quietly overflowing with emotion. They don't speak up because speaking would crack open a door. They're terrified they won't be able to shut again. They don't act because acting would force them to face consequences they aren't prepared for. They don't move closer because closeness would expose truths they've been avoiding, even from themselves. There's a well-known idea from Carl Jung suggesting that whatever we resist tends to persist and even grow stronger. That's precisely what's unfolding here. Every time this person tries to resist reaching out, the feeling only intensifies. Every time they choose restraint, the bond tightens further. Every time they deny what's happening internally, that connection doesn't disappear. It just stays trapped inside, growing rather than fading. This explains that odd, unpredictable push and pull energy you might be sensing. It's why you feel their presence even when they're nowhere nearby. It's why they cross your mind randomly, without any effort on your part. It's why your mood shifts for no obvious reason. You might sense them lingering even in complete silence. You might feel an unfinished energy running between you both. That's because feelings that get buried don't actually vanish, they wait. Jung also suggested that whatever remains unconscious and unexamined will continue directing your life from behind the scenes, and you'll end up mistaking it for fate. Right now, so much of what connects the two of you remains hidden, unspoken, unresolved. Because none of it has been brought into the open, it operates beneath the surface, quietly generating emotional tension. This person carries you privately in their thoughts, tucked into that space between the version of themselves they present to the world and who they really are when they're completely alone. On the outside, they might appear composed and in control, but internally there's a constant tug-of-war, a pulling back followed by leaning in, a wanting followed immediately by self-restraint. This isn't happening because you don't matter to them. It's happening because you matter far too much. They're afraid of upending lives, afraid of compromising their own values, afraid of igniting something they won't be able to stop once it starts. That internal battle is exhausting. It's why this connection can feel heavy at times, why it feels so intense even without a single word exchanged, and why physical distance never actually brings peace. Jung also compared meeting another person to a chemical reaction, suggesting that when two substances interact, both are inevitably altered. You've already reacted with each other. Whether either of you consciously realizes it or not, you've both been changed by knowing one another. Something inside you has genuinely shifted from experiencing them. This isn't your imagination running wild. It isn't some mistake. This is a connection that exists somewhere beyond ordinary logic, which is exactly why time alone doesn't make it fade. It doesn't survive on habit. It survives because it carries real meaning. Jung also noted that when love genuinely leads, there's no room left for the need to dominate or control. In this particular connection, power was never really the point. Control was never the objective. That's actually why the whole thing feels so confusing. There are no manipulative games happening here. No one is trying to outmaneuver the other. It's simply two people caught off guard by something they never planned for, unsure how to fold it into their already established lives. As all of this unfolds, one truth becomes increasingly obvious. You are not a distraction. You are not some accident. You cannot simply be swapped out for someone else. You're part of a larger story that's already been quietly steering both of you toward a deeper self-understanding. As that understanding continues to unfold, the true meaning behind this forbidden connection will keep revealing itself gradually, one layer at a time, patiently, until the next truth is ready to surface. And as that next layer settles in, something else becomes impossible to overlook. This connection doesn't behave like an ordinary crush. Distance doesn't weaken it. Logic doesn't dissolve it. It doesn't just disappear because the timing is inconvenient. Instead, it quietly trails both of you wherever you go. You might find that even during your busiest, most distracted stretches of life, this person resurfaces in your mind without you trying to summon them. It's not because you're consciously holding onto the memory, it's because something unresolved keeps knocking at the surface from underneath. The exact same thing is happening on their end. They might go days appearing completely unaffected. They might seem fully absorbed in work, family, daily routines and responsibilities, but the mind has this tendency to circle back to whatever remains unfinished. They remember how effortlessly you understood them without needing lengthy explanations. They remember how naturally conversation flowed between you, that unmistakable sense of recognition, the strange feeling of somehow already knowing you. They remember moments that carried more weight than they probably should have. And that's exactly why it terrifies them, because once you've experienced being seen that completely, there's no way to unsee it or unfeel it. This is where a lot of people misread forbidden connections entirely. They assume distance exists because one person simply cares less. But often, it's the complete opposite. Distance isn't always born from a lack of feeling. Sometimes it's created by an overwhelming abundance of feeling. This person understands that taking even one step closer to you could permanently change who they are in a way they might not be able to reverse. They sense that something irreversible is waiting just beyond the edge of honesty, and they aren't yet ready to dismantle the life they've painstakingly built, even if that life no longer genuinely fits who they've become. So they choose control over honesty. They choose structure over raw emotion. They choose familiar discomfort over an uncertain truth. But that choice comes at a cost. Every time they suppress what they're feeling, it doesn't simply vanish, it transforms into something else entirely inside them. It shows up as restlessness, distraction, and a growing sense of emotional distance from the very people they're supposed to be closest to. They might start questioning relationships that once felt completely secure. They might sense that something feels quietly absent. They might wonder why answers that used to satisfy them no longer do. They may never speak your name aloud, but you become an unspoken benchmark they measure their life against. You represent an emotional truth they haven't yet given themselves permission to actually live out. That's precisely why this connection feels unresolved. It isn't simply about two people desiring one another, it's about two entire lives standing at the edge of significant transformation. You feel this shift too, even if you can't fully put it into words. You might notice that after meeting them, your standards quietly recalibrated. What you're willing to accept in relationships feels different now. What you actually want has become clearer. What used to feel like enough now feels hollow. You might find yourself far less tolerant of connections where the other person is only partially emotionally present. You might have less patience for anything that lacks real depth. You've become more attuned to what genuine connection actually feels like. That awareness didn't appear from nowhere. It emerged from recognition. This is where the second layer of meaning begins to unfold. This connection isn't purely about desiring another person. It's about being awakened. Some relationships exist to build a shared future. Others exist to wake you up to your own truth. This one clearly falls into the second category, not because a future together is impossible, but because its primary purpose right now is internal work within each of you individually. You crossed paths with this person at a moment when something inside you was ready to be stirred, and they met you while quietly questioning the life they were living, even if they never voiced that uncertainty out loud. That's exactly why this pull feels so intense and so confusing simultaneously. Your mirrors reflecting each other. You reveal parts of themselves they've kept hidden. They reveal parts of you that had been waiting patiently to be acknowledged. This kind of bond doesn't operate on conventional timelines. It doesn't rush forward. It doesn't announce itself boldly. It works slowly, reshaping your priorities, your values, and your self-awareness from within. That's why even silence between you feels charged with energy, because something is still actively happening beneath it. You might wonder why letting go seems impossible, why logic fails to end it, why repeating to yourself that nothing can come of it never actually sets you free. It's because this bond isn't sustained by fantasy. It's sustained by a truth that hasn't been fully lived yet. And a truth once genuinely felt can never truly be forgotten. You're not just holding on to a person, you're holding on to an experience of emotional clarity that fundamentally changed you, and they're experiencing the exact same thing. None of this means you should simply wait around. It doesn't mean putting your entire life on hold. It doesn't mean sacrificing your present for some uncertain future possibility. It means understanding exactly what this connection is trying to teach you. It's revealing just how much emotional depth you're actually capable of. It's showing you what a connection that nourishes you rather than depletes you genuinely feels like. It's reminding you that authentic feeling exists beyond what's simply easy or safe, and it's teaching them the same lesson, whether or not they're willing to admit it yet. Whatever happens next isn't something you can force into existence. It can't be rushed through sheer desire, and it can't be manipulated through silence or through chasing them down. This particular kind of bond only opens up fully once honesty becomes stronger than fear. Until that shift happens, it remains suspended in an in-between space, not entirely gone, but not fully present either. It stays alive in thought, alive in feeling, and alive in those quiet moments where truth whispers rather than shouts. As time continues moving forward, the tension between who this person currently is and who they're gradually becoming will keep intensifying. The exact same thing is happening for you. Eventually, something inevitably has to shift, because a mind that's been fully awakened doesn't simply return to sleep. And when that shift finally arrives, it won't come from mere wanting. It will come from genuine readiness. And readiness rarely announces itself loudly. It doesn't arrive through grand gestures or dramatic conversations. It arrives quietly, through discomfort, and through the slow, creeping realization that something no longer fits comfortably into the life currently being lived. For them, this often starts as a small crack. They begin noticing that the roles they play feel heavier than before. Responsibilities they once accepted without question now start to feel confining. Their emotional routines start feeling hollow, even when everything appears perfectly fine on the surface to everyone else. You aren't the cause of this crack forming. You're simply the light that revealed it was already there. You didn't disrupt their life. You illuminated parts of it that were already misaligned. That's exactly why this connection feels dangerous to them. It's not because it threatens their physical safety, but because it threatens the illusion, the carefully constructed version of a life that isn't entirely authentic. Illusions tend to be comfortable. Truth rarely is. Truth demands accountability. Truth demands courage. Truth requires someone to honestly examine what they feel and decide whether they have the bravery to actually live according to it. Many people simply aren't ready to make that decision the moment the feeling first surfaces. So they wait. They rationalize. They tell themselves it's just a temporary phase, or purely their imagination, or something that will fade if they ignore it long enough. But genuinely deep connections don't dissolve through avoidance. They convert into mounting pressure instead. This explains those waves you might notice, moments of closeness followed by sudden emotional retreat, times when they seem fully present, only to unexpectedly pull away again, moments where you feel intensely connected without exchanging a single word. That inconsistency isn't confusion about you specifically. It's an internal battle they're fighting, caught between who they used to be and who they're gradually becoming, with you representing that doorway of transformation on your end of things. Something equally important is happening for you throughout all of this. You're learning to see things far more clearly. You're beginning to understand the real difference between intense feeling and genuine compatibility. You're learning to distinguish simple chemistry from an actual meaningful match. This connection wasn't meant to take over your entire life. It arrived to bring you clarity. You might notice you're no longer drawn to shallow attention the way you once were. You might feel far less interested in seeking external validation to feel adequate. You're less willing to shrink yourself just to make someone else comfortable. None of that is coincidental. That's genuine growth. This bond is quietly teaching you how to respect yourself without needing to say a single word about it. It's showing you what true emotional alignment feels like, even in an incomplete form. And once you've genuinely experienced that, you simply can't pretend you don't recognize the difference anymore. This is exactly why the connection feels significant. Significant doesn't mean flawless. It doesn't mean effortless. It doesn't guarantee a particular outcome. It simply means the experience carries genuine meaning regardless of how things ultimately unfold. Whether this eventually becomes something real or remains permanently unresolved, it has already accomplished part of its purpose. It has expanded your emotional capacity, it has sharpened your intuition, it has clarified exactly what matters most to you in love, and it's doing precisely the same for them. That's why neither of you can simply erase this from your lives, because it has become part of who you're both becoming. You might find yourself questioning why the timing feels so wrong, why this connection appeared at a moment when it couldn't easily be pursued. But timing is rarely a form of punishment. More often, it's a form of preparation. Sometimes two people cross paths not to immediately build a life together, but to individually transform first. Because without that internal growth, even the most powerful connection can crumble under the weight of fear and old, familiar patterns. Right now, both of you are being asked to look beyond simple desire and confront something far more fundamental, the actual truth. For them, the question is whether they're willing to live honestly, even knowing it comes with real consequences. For you, the question is whether you're willing to value yourself fully, even when waiting seems like the only available option. This is exactly why patience matters here, not patience rooted in blind hope, but patience grounded in genuine self-trust. You aren't meant to freeze your life in place. You aren't meant to remain stuck in a state of longing. You're meant to keep growing, keep making choices, and keep actually living. If this connection is destined to grow into something more, it will happen once both of you can show up fully, without hiding, without holding back. And if it never transforms into a shared life together, its impact will still remain, because it has already reshaped your inner compass. That isn't a loss. That's actually a beginning. So many people go through their entire lives without ever experiencing a connection powerful enough to genuinely wake them up. They remain comfortably asleep in relationships that feel secure but ultimately empty. They choose comfort over truth every single time. You didn't. You encountered something real enough to shatter your old patterns, expose your fears, and demand genuine growth from you. That alone sets this bond apart from anything ordinary. As time continues to pass, clarity will naturally emerge, not through force and not through passive waiting, but through living honestly. People eventually either rise to meet the truth they feel, or they retreat back into what feels familiar and safe. Both paths ultimately reveal themselves through actions rather than words, and you won't need to chase down those answers. They'll surface naturally through choices, behavior, and time itself. Until that moment arrives, hold on to what this connection has already given you. It has given you awareness. And once genuine awareness takes hold, you're never quite the same afterward. As that awareness deepens further, something small but permanent begins to take shape. You stop needing to define or label the connection. You stop demanding it explain itself. Instead, you start paying attention to what it's actually awakening within you. This is exactly where your personal power returns to you. The real danger in a forbidden connection was never simply wanting it. The real danger is losing yourself while trying to make sense of it. And you're no longer doing that. You're starting to notice how grounded you feel when you consistently choose yourself. How much calmer you feel once you stop searching for hidden signs everywhere. How much clearer your mind becomes once you stop trying to decode what silence supposedly means. That shift matters far more than you might realize. While this connection initially pulled you in with tremendous force, it's now teaching you something far more valuable. It's teaching you how to become fully your own person. You're learning that genuine connection never requires you to abandon who you are. Real love never asks you to sit indefinitely in confusion. Authentic feelings never require suffering as proof of their legitimacy. This particular lesson matters immensely, regardless of whether you ultimately stay connected to this person or not. Meanwhile, on their side, the internal tension continues to build. While you're consciously absorbing this lesson, they're still quietly wrestling with it. They now feel the contrast more sharply between the person they present to the world and who they become the moment they think of you. They notice the gap between the version of themselves that dutifully follows every rule and the version that feels genuinely alive in the presence of truth. That contradiction cannot remain buried indefinitely. People can avoid plenty of things. They can avoid difficult conversations. They can avoid making hard decisions. They can avoid confrontation entirely. But eventually, no one can avoid themselves forever. Something inevitably breaks open, not dramatically or loudly, but quietly. They start asking themselves questions they'd previously avoided entirely. They wonder why they feel so restless. They wonder why they feel disconnected from the very life they deliberately chose. They wonder why everything feels somehow incomplete. And even if your name never comes up out loud, your presence lingers within those unanswered questions. This is precisely the point where many forbidden connections either transform or come to an end entirely, because genuine awareness demands a choice, and every real choice demands courage. Some people rise to meet that moment fully. They choose honesty over appearances. They choose truth over comfort. They choose growth over fear. Others retreat instead. They hide deeper within routine. They reinforce the very walls they've already built even further. They convince themselves that emotional numbness is somehow equivalent to stability. Both responses ultimately reveal the truth through actions rather than words. And this is exactly where you need to remain firmly grounded in yourself. It was never your responsibility to rescue someone else from their own fear. It was never your obligation to sit around waiting indefinitely for someone else's readiness to finally catch up with yours.